on not like what seed you want is necessarily, but what road do you want? I don't know too many people who wouldn't be like, I don't want the 1 seed. Like, sure, you want the 1 seed. Like, it'd be great to just be like, let's sleep in our own beds and have the playoffs come through Santa Clara. That would be fantastic for the 49ers. I think that would be that would absolutely raise the likelihood of them ending up in the Super Bowl. But who scares you, who doesn't, sort of the ranking of opponents as they potentially would come in to take on the 49ers is a conversation we can have. But we also want to set the table with what we think is about to happen with the NFL today, because everywhere I go, Dibs, and this was true in the airport yesterday, what everyone wants to know, what is the NFL going to do? We knew about the cancellation of the Bills and Bengals game, but how does it recalibrate? We left here yesterday thinking that there might be an extra playoff team added to both conferences.
That was just kind of a fun lark that we kind of took on.
It was fun for a second.
By the time we got to the end of our show, I kind of realized in my own mind that wasn't going to happen. It was a fun hour or so where we thought about the what if, and Washington, all of a sudden, you're back in it. What are you going to do now? And 8 teams, and Washington can still get the 8 because they have this tie and all the rest of it. When you really took a step back, you realize that probably wasn't going to happen, but they still had to figure out what was going to happen.
Right.
And I give the NFL credit. They were so close to getting this absolutely perfectly right.
See, I think they did. I am going to give the NFL all the credit.
A-.
And here's why. Because first of all, we don't know exactly how this is going to play out. There still needs to be a vote, and they need, I think, 2/3 or 3/4 or whatever. And the Bengals are apparently trying to rally support against this idea. And I don't want to get too deep in the weeds because it's hard to describe.
It's a full page.
Yeah, to describe it over the radio is a little bit tough, but here's what we can tell you. A lot of it has to do with 4 teams. It's the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Ravens. These are the most affected teams, and their outcomes this weekend will determine, potentially, how deep into the weeds they all go. And so, for instance, if the Chiefs and the Bills both win this weekend, that means the Chiefs will have the winning percentage and therefore the 1 seed, but the Bills never got the opportunity to win their game, which would have given them the 1 seed. So if they end up in the AFC title game together, that's going to be at a neutral site.
But the Chiefs, by getting the 1, get the bye.
Right. They're going to be the 1 seed, but they do not get home field if they play the Bills in the AFC title game.
Correct.
To a degree, that is going to whittle down to the Bengals as well. Who gets home field based on those 3 teams, if they win this weekend, could be determined by just sending them to a neutral site. The other interesting thing to really understand is the Bengals and the Ravens. The Bengals, if this goes through, this is why it's interesting that they're voting against it, the Bengals will automatically be given the division championship. However, if they lose to the Ravens this weekend, that would have set up a situation where the Ravens could have won the division. So in exchange for not winning the division, if the Ravens and Bengals end up playing in the playoffs, home field will be determined by a coin flip.
See, that's where I think they got it wrong, because Baltimore would have beaten them twice. Give Baltimore the home game. Bengals win the division based on the fact that they didn't have an opportunity to lose to Buffalo. And I'm not saying they would have lost to Buffalo.
Yeah, they were ahead.
We don't know. 7-3. They were up with 51 minutes left to go in that ball game. So
couple minutes left.
A lot of meat left on that bone, but Baltimore would have beaten them twice. So it's kind of cool that at least a coin flip gives Baltimore a chance to host, but I think Baltimore should just outright get to host that game.
And that's where you and I...
That's where we differ.
We see it differently because Baltimore very easily could have changed that scenario by, not blowing it against Pittsburgh just a few nights ago in the Sunday Night Football game. Like, you could have won more games, and we do have to go back to that. So we can't just make the whole year about head-to-head competition. Here's what I love about it.
Just real quick, Mark, by the way, those teams will play in the first round. If the Bengals...
Potentially.
If the Ravens beat the Bengals, the Chargers are going to beat the Broncos. The Chargers will be the 5.
I'm not going to anything. Well, I have no idea what's going to happen in these football games.
They're going to beat the Broncos.
Maybe.
The Chargers are playing great, and Denver is still a badly broken team with an interim head coach. So if things go according to form... Bengals get the 3, Ravens get the 6. That would be your first round matchup.
And you'd get a coin flip, right? And so that we'll see. We'll see how these games...
I see why the Bengals would be mad, because you go from having a lead over Buffalo and maybe a chance at the 1 to all of a sudden you're the 3 and you have to travel to Baltimore?
Right, but here's what I love about it. This is what the NFL did. I really feel there were 2 things that they decided were their priority, because anytime you have something like this, you've got to decide what's your priority. We've all agreed on one thing. Nothing is perfect.
Right.
Nothing is fair to everybody. We're going to have some dings in this process. So boil it down. What's your priority? It's kind of like, can we give up that week before the Super Bowl, or do we just cancel the game? They decided their priority was keeping the playoff structure. So there were 2 real priorities here. Priority 1, let's affect as few teams as possible. So that's why we're not getting an 8th team in the AFC and the NFC and all of this. They decided, look, we're not going to change the rules to the point where this affects all 14 playoff teams, maybe even turning it into 16 playoff teams. Let's affect as few teams as possible. The second priority was, let's make sure everybody affected gets seen. We're going to give you something. We're going to take something from you, but we're going to give you something as well. Chiefs, if you win your game, you're the 1 seed. We gave you something. However, Bills, we're going to give you something. If you get your way through your home field to the AFC title game, you're not going to have to go play at Arrowhead Stadium. Okay? So, Chiefs, we gave you something. Bills, we're giving you something. Hey, Ravens, we're going to give you something. You're going to finish in second place. You get a coin. But you get a coin. And you may end up hosting the team who finished ahead of you. Yeah. But Bengals, we're going to give you something. Here's the AFC North. You win, even though you might not have. So everybody who got dinged also got a gift. You open it up and you go, okay, so everyone is seen and heard. No, it's
everyone
not.
Everyone gets something, yeah.
It's not perfect, but to me, in a world that is always unfair, they tried to be as fair to each individual team as possible. I give the NFL a whole lot of credit for the way this all is playing out.
And just a couple things left to be determined. One, obviously, the approval of this by vote, and I would imagine that it does get approved, because what team is going to side with Cincinnati and try to upset what is a pretty good resolution? And by the way, the AFC Championship game will be played at a neutral site. The only way it wouldn't be is if Buffalo and Kansas City both get knocked out, or Kansas City and Cincinnati both get knocked out.
Not necessarily.
If a couple of those are in there, absolutely.
Not necessarily. My understanding is
Buffalo, Kansas City, or Cincinnati are all involved in that. If 2 of those 3 are in the game, it's a neutral.
Depending on how they do it this weekend. If the Bills win this weekend and the Chiefs lose, the Bills are outright the champ, because they'll have the better winning percentage. They've got the head-to-head victory over the Chiefs.
Yeah, so they didn't put that in here.
Right.
If one wins and one loses.
Right. It is all dependent on how it plays out this weekend, and then you look at it and go, okay, who was robbed of an opportunity? And if you were robbed of an opportunity, here's our gift to you. But if the Bills win this weekend and the Chiefs lose, the Bills would have been the 1 seed either way.
But if the Chiefs win and the Bills lose, then
same thing.
Same thing.
Then the Chiefs are the outright one. So it also does create a little carrot, a little urgency in these games for these teams to go after them and win them,
true.
Which is the way you wanted it to be. That's the way you wanted it to be. So all of that is on the table.